This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All right. There he is. How you feeling, my man?
Big O, we are back. It is good to be back with you, brother. Hell, it's
and better
good to have
than
fantasy
ever.
underway.
Now we got video. We got your own board. We got it all going on, baby. We got your own open and everything. Come on.
Nobody needed to see me, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
Oh, I mean, but still, they've heard the name for many years, right, with me. So, whether it's at 640 or 560 or whatever, all different platforms. Thank the Lord, we have our own platform now, and we don't have to depend on anything else, my brother. It is a blessing to be able to do this every day, and dude, I'm so happy that we were able to resurrect this. So it's really cool to have you back, man. Really cool.
I always enjoy talking fantasy with hosts who actually play and are really engaged with it. I've told you for many years that you're just about my favorite my favorite host to ever chat fantasy with because I know you're deep into it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it since I had to write my own newsletter and take stats. I had to wait for the paper on Monday because we didn't have computers.
The Zoomers don't know. The kids don't know.
Yeah,
right?
They don't know that. Yeah, dude.
You had to wait for the USA Today, and everybody had to score their matchups independently, and then you matched them up, and you're like, okay, we agree. I won.
Yep.
Had to get the lineups Tuesday, in on Friday.
Yeah. And Tuesday, I remember I would get the final stats for the Monday show for the Monday game. And then it was in the paper, and then I'd write my newsletter and mail them all out on Tuesday afternoon, so everybody would have them usually by Thursday. Worst case scenario, Friday, they'd have it in their mailbox, and because there was no website or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that was like your newspaper for fantasy, man. Yeah, it's I'm old, bro. I'm old. I've been doing it for a long, long time, man. So if you have any fantasy questions for Andy, send them in now. You can send them in on the Welt and Rayom text line at 855-912-1056. You can also send them in on our Twitter page at Big O Show, and right here on the YouTube chat board. We got over 400 people right now on the YouTube chat board. So if you have any fantasy questions, send them in. So let me ask you something. Let's start off with under the radar player that you like that maybe is still wire available to some people and they're overlooking even though everybody's had their drafts. Give me a name.
Yeah, I was just putting together a list of potential pickup recommendations ahead of week one. It may seem weird to just had your draft, you're feeling good about it, and hey, let's blow up the roster a little bit and add some players. But the one thing about fantasy leagues, like if you want to win, you got to be active and aggressive basically all the time. I have been, now this isn't like a super flashy name, but if you're in a somewhat deeper league, you've got, maybe you're playing any sort of PPR format. Jarvis Landry is still available in like 60% of Yahoo leagues, which is a little bit crazy to me because he's never not been great when he's healthy, right? He's healthy right now. We're doing a lot of talking about Michael Thomas. We're doing a lot of talking about Chris Olave. I get it. These guys are both great players. Again, Thomas, when he's healthy, he's been a little bit dinged.
Unreliable, yes.
It's been dinged for 2 years, and he's picked up another injury right now. Jarvis Landry is a really good player, and he clearly has a connection with Jameis Winston. The only problem I see here is if the Saints are going to be this team that just throws the ball like 20 to 25 times, which is possible, right? They were getting incredible production out of Jameis last year on a pretty low volume of pass attempts. So that would be a problem for Jarvis, but otherwise, he's pretty well locked in at 8 targets a game, 9 targets a game, something like that, I think. And he's a good bet to catch 6 of those balls, 7 of those balls week in and week out. I think he's a really good play who should not be so widely available.
All right, on the Welt and Rayom text line, Big O, I need 4 in a flex for PPR. J.K. Dobbins, Hollywood Brown, Tony Pollard, Antonio Gibson, Matt Ryan, and Mecole Hardman.
Well, you got to play Matt Ryan if you can flex a quarterback, right? Most leagues have quarterback scoring that is so favorable that you can't possibly bench one. So, by the way, kudos to you on playing with so many flex spots. I'm a big fan. I know Scott is a big fan of playing with as many active roster spots as possible. It really it tilts the balance of the league toward actual skill instead of having lucked into just the right player in the draft, right? So I like that. Right. I would probably sit Hardman here, and I'm pretty tempted to sit Tony Pollard. Why? It's the Bucks, right? And if you remember, like the Cowboys and Bucks gave us that brilliant week 1 game last year. It's one of the only games from last season that I've like rewatched multiple times in the off season. It was a fantastic game. The one thing that you'll recall from that game is Dallas didn't even attempt to run. Like Zeke, basically, I think Zeke had something like 10 touches, 10 rush attempts in that game. Can't run very easily against Tampa Bay defensive front. I would not expect Dallas to try to do it this time either, especially with a banged up offensive line, a lot of questions on that offensive line. So I don't think we're going to see much from Pollard or Zeke in this game against the Bucks. In fact, I think both are going to be pretty intriguing, like buy low candidates as we come out of this one, because I think they're both just in for like, I don't know. It's not going to surprise me if Zeke sees like 11 touches and Pollard sees 6.
All right. Which two, Hilaire, Montgomery, Gainwell, or Mostert for week 1?
This has got to come from a Dolphins fan, right? Like I'm kind of into Raheem Mostert. Like I think he's when he's healthy, he's just been a wonderful player in the past. But I don't think we can reasonably expect a significant workload from Raheem Mostert right off the bat. I would be surprised if that isn't mostly Chase Edmonds' backfield. The highest and best possible use of Raheem Mostert is probably like 8 to 10 touches a game, right? And you just maximize whatever he's got left to give. He's a burner. He's really fun. You're not going to start him here in week 1. I'm gonna play CEH here, which is not an exciting play, and he's probably not going to see anything close to like 3/4 of the snaps in that backfield. But it's still Kansas City. It's still an offense that is going to move the ball. So I'm going to play CEH and I'm going to play Montgomery there. Montgomery, again, another somewhat boring play, but based on preseason usage, it certainly seems as if Montgomery is again going to be the no doubt lead back for Chicago.
Okay, let me ask you, might as well, since obviously this is a show that talks a lot of South Florida sports, and Dolphins are usually the centerpiece also of a lot of our conversations. So you get a lot of homerism in any fantasy draft, no matter what city you're in, New York, Chicago, whatever. People will favor their favorite teams. Break it down on the Dolphins side. Who do you like as a fantasy stud starter, and who's more of a reserve when you look at that offense?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm just getting into a couple of leagues now that are more hometown leagues for me, which in my case is Chicago. You'd be amazed at where Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney are going in these things. It's wild. It's really wild. I don't think that much of the Bears this season, but they are going well ahead of ADP in any sort of hometown format. I think Tyreek Hill is perfectly safe. Like I think I'm probably within the fantasy community. I probably tend toward being somewhat bullish on Tua. Obviously, I was super excited about him when he came out of college. I thought he made some truly incredible throws and like audacious throws as a collegiate player. Like I was pretty into Tua. He didn't have the offensive line to support anything that team wanted to do last year.
He didn't have anything.
That's pretty clear.
He didn't have offensive. That was the worst offensive staff in the history of the Miami Dolphins. They had the three stooges arguing what plays to send them every 40 seconds.
Yeah, so I hate to base any opinion on Tua moving forward off of like what we saw last year. No time to throw, poor coaching environment, not exactly a stellar receiving core outside of Waddle. I mean, I think Tyreek Hill is a one-of-one sort of player in today's league. He's like the one guy in the NFL who gets appreciable snaps, who actually has something close to world-class speed, right? I think he's just an insane talent, and is going to make a ton of difference for that team. I'm not super bullish on week 1, right? I respect the Patriots defense. I respect the Patriots pass defense. I'd be surprised if we see Tua put up numbers that are like top 10 at the position right off the bat, but I do think he's going to have plenty of weeks, throw into Waddle, throw into Hill. I think those two are in great situations. I think Chase Edmonds is a super talented player, just needs to stay healthy. It's possible that Chase Edmonds will sort of be the guy between the 10s, between the 20s, and then we see someone like Mostert come onto the field and vulture some touchdowns. That's definitely possible. But I think Chase Edmonds, again, in any sort of PPR league, is really interesting. I'm pretty out on Mike Gesicki. I don't have the sense that he's exactly what the coaching staff is looking for in a tight end. He almost never played in line last year, right? Rarely ever blocked. I mean, I was looking at the number of snaps taken by tight ends in line a little while ago, and Mike Gesicki was barely ahead of like Alan Lazard and some of the league's larger receivers, right? Like he fundamentally played as a slot receiver. I don't know that that's what the coaching
A
staff
hell of a
is looking
gamble
for
right
this
now,
year.
drafting Gesicki early.
Yeah. I just couldn't do it. I've passed on him in pretty much every league. I think I still have him in like one dynasty league, but that's it.
Smythe passed him. Smythe is a starter. Smythe is a guy that can do it all. He blocks and he's actually a pretty smooth catcher. He's not dynamic. That's the thing. Gesicki's dynamic. But yeah, it's really up to if somehow or another he figures out the blocking, then he can become one hell of a weapon for this team. But yeah, that's why I think they also got Cedric Wilson, because they got a big slot guy. So that would help out Tua too. So you've got big bodies working the middle of the field, not just your tight ends, but you get a big slot, which normally slots are small guys. They got a big slot and a 6'2" slot guy. So I think these are things that you have to look at. They kept a kid by the name of Tanner Connor, who's a former track star, and he missed half of camp with injuries, but he is a blazer. And so they have him at tight end. And so that's a guy you have to look at, that he might be that project, because notice what they did throughout the entire offense, the entire offseason. Tyreek, fast. Cedric, fast for a big slot guy. He'll be quicker than people think. The Azukama kid actually can get behind defenses. Then they added 2 quick running backs to the team. They already had Waddle.
I was going to say they already had Jalen Waddle, who was one of the not that they fully took advantage of his speed last year, but one of the fastest guys in the league.
And now they found a tight end that's a former track star. So there's clearly a requirement of we're adding speed to this team. And so that's why the Gesicki thing becomes even more muddled, because if they do like Tanner Connor and somehow or another they start working him in, that's another guy taking the football away from Gesicki, and another guy that is sharing it with Smythe. And so then
I'm a little surprised they didn't find a trade partner for Gesicki. It's got to be coming at some
$10 million, the $11 million salary. You have to find a team that has the space. 2, the team was probably requiring them to pick up $5 or $6 million of that salary, and so then they would then require a higher pick in return. So it becomes kind of a convoluted thing. I think they've got to wait till the trading deadline so they can find out if he fits, or if he doesn't. Okay, did somebody lose a tight end? Do they need to make a trade? And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. It's let's find out to the trading deadline if Gesicki fits or not, or if then we move him and then we go on with Smythe and Tanner Connor and Ethan Carter and all the other guys that they have there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's probably got to go. I think it's a little late in the game for Mike Gesicki to become like a serviceable blocker. That he's never been asked to do it. We haven't seen it. Again, he was barely ever in line last season. Barely spent a moment blocking. So I don't think that's right around the corner for him.
All right, Homer question: Dolphins or Browns defense special teams this week? So that's definitely got to be somebody. And then he also asked, DK Metcalf this week and for the season, and that is Christopher. Thank you, Christopher, for chiming in.
I think the Dolphins for a week are like this is almost difficult for me, because I think the Dolphins for a week could be a better bet, because I'm just not a big believer in the Patriots offense generally. I'm not some huge Mac Jones believer. It hasn't been a great camp and preseason for that player or for that team necessarily. They got a weird play calling situation. So for a week, I think I'd be on the Dolphins. However, I will say say that the first month of the season for Cleveland is smooth sailing, and it starts with Carolina. You got to figure they know Baker Mayfield about as well as any team does, and they've got a bunch of game wreckers and Garrett and Clowney and Ward, and like I think they'll probably pull the ball away from Carolina a couple times. I think Cleveland's going to be a really good play for like a month and a half. So I've actually drafted a lot of them because it's just kind of a set it and forget it defense early in the season. Your question about DK Metcalf is a huge one, right? Because he is as physically talented as any skill player in the league, basically, in terms of speed, size. Doesn't even make sense that a guy could be that big and that fast. And yet he is. Supremely gifted player. He's going to be catching passes from Geno Smith. I mean, I don't know how to sugarcoat that. It's not a great situation. And if Geno Smith isn't healthy, it's going to be Drew Lock. Like, it's bad. Do I think DK can overcome it to an extent? Yes. Can DK finish with 80 catches, over 900 yards? He probably gives away some of those touchdowns from last season. Like, the TDs really saved his year, and he was great at the end of the season. If you happen to make it to the fantasy championship week with DK Metcalf, he blew up. Like, he was great, but this ain't Russ anymore. So I think expecting more than, say, 8 touchdowns out of DK is a little bullish. I think he's a fine sort of low end wide receiver too. But man, that guy really, if you had him in a dynasty league, you were really pulling for a trade in the offseason. You really wanted to see that guy land with, I don't know, anybody, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, anyone who could make his situation a little bit better.
All right. So let me ask you, speaking of homer picks, I would imagine it's going on in New York a little bit, but I don't buy the Zach Wilson. I know he's a little banged up right now, but even when he gets back, I just don't buy that Jet offense, even with Zach Wilson. But there are, like, Wilson and Hall are pretty talented kids. They do have some talented guys that could be fantasy players, but I just don't buy the quarterback in the offense. So how do you suggest people look at some of that Jet talent?
Yeah, first of all, I think you didn't mention him there, but I think Elijah Moore can be a star. Like,
yeah, that's
throw
true.
that guy in the right offense with the right quarterback, and I think that guy can just have a supernova season. But it ain't going to be this year, not with the combination of Joe Flacco and then a Zach Wilson, of some version of Zach Wilson coming back from injury. I'm a little bit conflicted on Zach Wilson because the only thing that I really ask from a rookie quarterback is I just want to see the flashes occasionally, right? I just want to see the traits that can make you down the road a viable fantasy starter. And we definitely saw them from Wilson last year. Like, he has the mobility. He's got a huge arm. He can make some crazy throws, like just, off platform, off schedule. He's got the arm, and he's got the dual threat ability. So we like that. He's also a guy, however, who I never would have drafted where he went. I thought he was the overwhelming beneficiary of an incredible offensive line and a really soft schedule at BYU, right? Like, he just didn't, there was very little asked of him at BYU in terms of like avoiding pressure. He had an ocean of space around him all the time. The one game where he faced a good defense, I think, was Coastal Carolina, and they got to him, and he had a terrible game, right? So, but every other week was smooth sailing for him. So I'm not a huge Zach Wilson believer. I don't think he can support more than one starting quality fantasy receiver. For me, that's more. There's all kinds of questions about the offensive line now. They've tried to address it. I think Breece Hall is going to be a thing, but even that could, that could have to wait until October or November, because it sure sounds like they're going to split carries between Carter and Breece Hall to open the season.
Yeah. It's interesting because there are some talented guys on that team, but I don't buy the offense and I don't buy the quarterback. Deebo Samuel. Let's talk fantasy philosophy / reality. Okay. One of the things that running quarterbacks, if they're good running quarterbacks, they have a tendency of elevating your running game and your running back. Actually, your running back tends to have a really good season when they have a running quarterback because the defense is so focused on him that it complements him. But when we talk about Deebo Samuel, who's a running wide receiver, right? Because he's kind of a running back that plays wide receiver. Okay, and Trey Lance is a quarterback who has a running skill to him. Do you think it's going to benefit Deebo Samuel's game, or it's going to be a detriment to Deebo Samuel's game because he's not necessarily a running back, but he kind of plays it a little bit. So how do you look at the Deebo Samuel thing with Trey Lance in the mix? Because he has elements that could help him.
I think to your point about the way that a great rushing quarterback can really boost a running game overall and make life a lot easier for the running backs on your team. You know, I know that Miles Sanders didn't find the end zone last year, and that was really weird. But man, that guy was hyper efficient as a runner last year, in large part because he had Jalen Hurts right next to him, right? Who was as dangerous a rushing threat as anyone at the quarterback position last year.
Lamar.
Lamar is a fine example. Like Lamar's been surrounded by some pretty sketchy backs, and they've all had great years behind him because Lamar is so dangerous himself. So it's a very good point. And most of this benefits, I think, Elijah Mitchell to a great extent this season. The biggest thing that I'm watching for in this Niners-Bears game this week, because I realistically, I think this is a game where you're going to see San Francisco's intended game script for the season, right? Like, I don't think the Bears are going to get out to like some 3-score lead and San Francisco is going to have to rip up the offensive game plan. I think you'll see the Niners do what they you'll see their offensive identity. And I'm terrified that it's going to be, we're going to attempt 20 or 25 passes and we're going to try to run the ball down your throat. Like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be something like that. I'll feel a whole lot better about Niners pass catchers generally. And like, keep in mind, like, it was really fun that Deebo Samuel carried the ball a lot last year and he's a little bit of a running back at times, but he would have been enormously valuable simply as a receiver. He was a great receiver for that team last year. But if they're throwing the ball 20 to 25 times a game, and now we've got to support Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Danny Gray is maybe a thing, that's just not going to happen. Like, there's almost no path for Deebo to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver if he's getting targeted like 5 or 6 times a game, which is about all that's available to him if they're only going to throw it 20 or 25. So that is my biggest concern. I don't have the sense that Deebo wants to continue to be a running back. They did put some contract incentives in there to reward him based on the number of carries that he finishes with. You're right to mention that he's basically built that way. I mean, he's built as sort of a multi-tool, and they used him that way brilliantly last year. I don't know that we're going to see a ton of rush attempts this season. It's probably back to 2 or 3 a game. It's helpful for him, but again, my overriding concern is whether they want to be this sort of 1978 offense that that runs the ball like 35 or 40 times a game when they can.
All right, final question. Flex spot: Edmonds, Judy, Devontae Smith, or Ayuk?
Oh man, I really like Ayuk in particular over the course of the season, but I'm going to go Edmonds there. Like, that's how you got to the Patriots last season. They were not a particularly good run defense. They were an almost impenetrable pass defense. They finished the season with more interceptions than touchdown passes allowed. So I think that's the way you gash the Patriots, and I think Edmonds is probably in for a really big week.
And then his second question was bigger upside this season: Zach Ertz or Iquibu-Boam, or whatever the guy's name is.
Alberto.
Yeah, Alberto. Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah, we'll go with that. I like that. Alberto.
It's so much easier than trying to spit all that out. Yeah, it's probably, I mean, realistically, Alberto is not going to be more than the 3rd or 4th option in that passing offense. So I think you have to go Zach Ertz there.
All right, what are you working on Yahoo? So the listeners can check you out, my friend.
Hey, we're in week 1. I'm going to have a full list of recommended pickups this week, probably tomorrow. We've got the first edition of Fantasy Football Live on Sunday morning, an hour before kickoff. Please join us.
There you go. And follow him on Twitter at Andy Behrens. Andy, great to have you back, my brother. Appreciate you. Look forward to this entire year, even into the offseason. We're doing this. This is different now. This is year-round fantasy. We're going to be going through free agency with you, going through the draft with you, going through all the camps with you, all the injuries, all that stuff. So we're doing something we have never done before, actually, year-round fantasy.
Big O, I can't wait. You're the absolute best. Always enjoy our segments, so I'm looking forward to it, man.
Awesome. Andy, thank you, my brother. We'll catch up next week, my friend. Thank you. You have now stepped into the fantasy football zone.
Show.